One of the most boring things about any job is having to sit down and waste time in a meeting talking about something that's either unimportant or doesn't concern you in any significant way. These meetings tend to drag on for far longer than they ever should have to, and being forced to sit in one of these, most people will have a single thought running through their head. How much longer is this stupid nonsense going to last? That is very much what it feels like watching this episode, not only because it's excruciatingly boring, but because a lot of the dialogue occurs when the characters are sitting down in a meeting. This doesn't just happen once or twice, but 4 times throughout this episode. Already, I found that watching this series is not so much about enjoyment, but rather endurance. How long can you endure sitting through a dreadfully awful show that should have never been made? Secret Invasion is bad. Episode 2. We open with a flashback to 1997, shortly after the events of the Captain Marvel movie. Nick Fury is in a meeting, because of course, with a bunch of Skrulls. One of them is Gravik, who happens to be the villain of this series. Fury offers them a deal that if they work for him and take on the appearance of humans, that he will keep them safe and help them find a new world that they can go and live on. Don't ask how he's going to do this. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Flash forward to today, and immediately after the events of the previous episode, Talos grabs Nick Fury and puts him in the back of a van and takes off while another person is being arrested. This other guy keeps screaming that he's an American, which seems a little bit strange right now, but it will become apparent why he's doing this later on. In the next scene, we have some soldiers on a train looking for Nick Fury. They're going cabin to cabin, and one of the doors is answered by a Russian woman. When they explain who they're looking for, she kind of laughs and says that it's absurd for a black man to try to hide in Moscow, and then it would be easier for him if he was an alien. The men then move off, and the woman is revealed to be Talos in disguise.
Can you see where this is going?
This is followed by Nick Fury stepping out of an adjacent bathroom. Now, I'm not sure if the writers on this series are blindingly oblivious or just extraordinarily stupid, because this is the exact same situation that I pointed out in the previous episode. The population of black people in Moscow is 0.03%. So the writers are using it as a joke right now, but were completely unaware of it in the previous episode when they made one of the Skrulls in Moscow try to hide and use his disguise as a black man.
Oh god, this show is so bad!
But don't worry, it gets worse, because now we get some unnecessary shoehorned race baiting from Nick Fury as he talks about how wonderful the train car is now, but when he was a kid, the trains in America were segregated.
That was a racist slur!
Assuming for a moment that Nick Fury is the same age as Samuel L. Jackson, train car segregation would have ended when Nick Fury was about 5 years old, meaning that he would have really no concept of what it was actually like, and any memories would be vague at best. But this is just another way of the writers to include their woke bullshit and to falsely paint America as if it was still this extremely racist place because there was this bad thing that happened a while ago. The irony here is that Samuel L. Jackson is a Democrat, and it was the Democrats who were directly responsible for the very segregation that he would have experienced as a kid. But he's too fucking stupid to actually understand or even acknowledge it.
Now we'll build a projection machine.
I mean, it could be worse. He could be George Takei, who is a proud Democrat despite the fact that he and his family were quite literally placed into internment camps by the Democrats. That's some serious Stockholm Syndrome right there.
Maybe just 2 days in San Francisco was enough to cause mental illness.
Regardless, Talos reveals that there are more Skrulls on Earth than Nick Fury had originally been led to believe. Instead of just a few hundred, there are in fact about 1 million. Nick Fury freaks out about this, and we get some more race-baiting bullshit about humans aren't able to live together with themselves, never mind aliens. But this does bring up a very good question. Why are there no other aliens attempting to visit Earth? There are quite a few planets that would be friendly with Earth, especially considering that it was the heroes of Earth that were able to reverse the damage that Thanos had done. The Ravagers had traveled to Earth for the battle that happened in Endgame. There are quite a few other planets that know about Earth and would absolutely want to have peaceful relations with the humans on Earth.
Logic is an integral part of narrative structure.
And it's not like humans don't know about the existence of aliens. Loki attacked New York, everything Thanos did. Thor is one of the most popular heroes on the planet. You have an entire city created by Asgardians who are aliens. I mean, everybody on the planet knows about aliens. So why are the other planets not trying to communicate with Earth? I mean, at the very least, try to thank them for saving half the life in the universe, right? You would think that they would, hey, maybe you want to have some technology, maybe we can give you a little bit of something here, maybe even a thank you card with a fruitcake. I mean, something. But none of the other planets in the entire galaxy, entire universe for that matter, want to have anything to do with Earth. Why? Why is no one in the entire universe trying to communicate with Earth? It just doesn't make any sense at all.
I barely have a reason to care, and even I noticed.
Continuing with Talos and Nick Fury, that scene gets even dumber, because remember, the soldiers were looking for a black American on the train, and during this scene, Nick Fury is yelling very loudly in English. Remember, Nick Fury is supposed to be the world's greatest super spy, and yet he is completely giving away his location by screaming in English on this Russian train where soldiers are actively looking for him.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm kind of retarded.
The following scene has Nick Fury arriving at an airport in London where we see the casket of Maria. There's a woman who's mourning over the casket, then she walks over to confront Nick Fury. We get several minutes of dialogue, and during this entire time, I was fully expecting it to be revealed that this woman was actually Maria's wife from some sort of gay marriage or something, but it turned out to be her mother, which honestly was a bigger surprise than just having Maria be gay.
What's the matter with you? Do I look gay to you?
Regardless, the woman starts tearing into Nick Fury, blaming him for Maria's death and calling him, you guessed it, weak and pathetic. Pretty much everything that we saw from the first episode is just being repeated here. Next up, we get some news broadcasts talking about what happened in the previous episode. There's supposedly a group called Americans Against Russia that was responsible for the attack. It seems pretty obvious at this point that the person who was screaming, I'm an American, is actually a Skrull, and the purpose of that was to create hostility between Russia and America. Moving on, now we have another one of those amazingly boring scenes that involve a meeting. This time it's Gravik who's meeting with a bunch of world leaders in secret who all turn out to be Skrulls. They've all adapted to living as humans, however Gravik hates it and sees humans as vile creatures who degrade and destroy their own habitat, which sounds like a bunch of talking points taken right out of Greta's Handbook of Stupidity.
How dare you!
This Council of Skrulls is discussing possible punishment for Gravik because he's now responsible for the death of over 2,000 humans. He claims that it's justified because the humans tossed them aside and Nick Fury broke his promise.
Gonna cry?
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that, no, that's not justified. In fact, that's really fucking stupid. And speaking of things that are really fucking stupid, I think now's a pretty good opportunity to point out the absurdity of Nick Fury's promise to begin with. How exactly were humans in the late 90s, when he made this promise, supposed to be able to find another home for the Skrulls? Even now, 20 years later, we barely have the capability of going to Mars with unmanned probes. How exactly are humans supposed to find another planet that would be habitable for the Skrulls? But you want to know what's really dumb? This group of Skrulls already knows about another habitable planet that doesn't have any sentient life already living on it. It is just empty. It's there, waiting for anybody who wants to move in to go and live on that planet. It would be a perfect opportunity for the Skrulls to go and live there. This group of Skrulls knows about that planet. The Avengers know about that planet. Nick Fury knows about that planet. But apparently the writers have forgotten about it. Now, I can't talk about it too much because we'll get into a little bit on that later on in some of the other episodes, but I'll give you a hint. The planet was once occupied by a single person. His name rhymes with Blanos.
Yeah, I pulled a sneaky on you.
Regardless, Gravik lays out his plan to conquer the Earth and use it for the Skrulls. One of the other council members nominates him as a wartime general, and all of the other council members reluctantly agree to go along with it, except for one Skrull who happens to be brave enough to defy him, and of course this one Skrull happens to be taking on the form of a non-white woman. Because fucking of course.
I am shocked.
Shocked!
The Skrulls that support Gravik are white, and that means they're bad, but this one isn't. Wow, the writers, you're about as subtle as a jackhammer, you fucking clowns. Later on, Gravik and Danny return to the abandoned nuclear site, and Danny sees some random guy walking around, and for absolutely no apparent reason, she decides to start following this other random guy. There's no reason for her to follow him. He wasn't doing anything suspicious. He doesn't appear out of the ordinary. He's probably been there for a while. She just suddenly starts following him, and there's no reason to it at all, but it's important to the plot, so it needs to happen.
That's just lazy writing.
She follows him to another part of the facility where she finds a completely unguarded secret lab, and there are a bunch of scientists working there. She overhears some of them talking about something known as the Harvest, and then the scene ends. I have a couple of questions. Danny is the number 2 leader in this entire Skrull organization and has the complete trust of Gravik because she was the one who was willing to betray her own father and Nick Fury in order to allow the attack to be successful in the previous episode. So Gravik trusts her. Why doesn't he tell her about this secret project? Also, why is this laboratory not guarded by anyone? It's just in a different part of the compound. Anyone from the Skrulls could just happen to wander over there and stumble into this ultra secret compound that is so important that Gravik doesn't even tell his number 2 leader in the entire organization. Why? Why?
That is the stupidest story I ever heard.
But now we have to move on to more important things, like another scene with a boring meeting. This time, it's Colonel Rhodey who's meeting with the leaders of Europe who demand answers from America about the attack. However, the president doesn't show up himself and said he sent Colonel Rhodey. At first, Rhodey appears to be a little bit spineless, but eventually he does happen to grow a pair and tells all of the Eurotrash leaders to basically go pound sand. After leaving that meeting, Rhodey gets a call from Nick Fury, who wants to set up, you guessed it, another meeting. So far, there have been 4 meetings within this episode. Not exactly the most riveting entertainment, I can assure you.
Please, no more!
Rhodey is quite upset with Nick Fury and asks him what he had been doing during the attack. Nick Fury says that he had been trying to stop it, and Rhodey sarcastically replies, great job, they still managed to kill 2,000 people. Now, earlier in the episode, when the Skrull Council had mentioned Gravik killing 2,000 people, I thought they had meant that this was combining all of the different attacks throughout the entire world, but apparently it was just that one attack in Moscow, which doesn't make any fucking sense at all because we saw what happened in Moscow. We're supposed to believe that this right here somehow managed to kill 2,000 people? How?
You're painting a picture that isn't grounded in reality. It's not even the reality of your own life.
Judging by the size of this explosion, it could have taken out a few dozen people at most, but 2,000 is simply absurd. We're talking 9/11 levels of destruction here in order to take out 2,000 people, and this is not it at all.
It never happened. No way. It never happened.
Rhodey then reveals that he knows about the Skrulls and what they're capable of. He suggests bringing in the Avengers, but Nick Fury says that's not a good idea, because then the Skrulls would take on the shape of the Avengers and they could do bad stuff, and then the whole world would hate the Avengers. And this, of course, doesn't make any sense at all, because they could already do that if they wanted to. A Skrull doesn't need to physically touch a person in order to take their shape. Simply looking at an image of a person is good enough for a Skrull to be able to shapeshift. Nick Fury's objection to all of this is fucking idiotic, and once again, makes no sense at all.
Not another one? I can't stand this.
But don't worry, it gets worse. Nick Fury asks for help from Rhodey, and he decides to pull out the race card.
I expect nothing, and I'm still let down.
He says that men like us don't get promoted because of our daddy, we have to earn it in blood. Help a brother out.
That is one big pile of shit.
Somehow it manages to get even dumber because then Rhodey responds by saying, we didn't wrestle this power away from mediocre men that don't look like us, only to hand it over to mediocre men who do. The writers made sure to hit all the woke talking points on that one. Also, this is the 3rd or 4th time in this very episode that the writers felt the need to include this kind of fucking nonsense. And you wonder why no one wanted to watch this show. Going back to the discussion, not only is what Nick Fury is saying extraordinarily racist, it's also objectively wrong. No doubt there is nepotism throughout the government, but the vast majority of people who achieve success, whether it's public or the private sector, do so through their own actions. To suggest that this only happens with black people is fucking ridiculous. If anything, nepotism and favoritism will favor black people exponentially more than it ever would a white person. People get accepted into colleges, hired for jobs, and promoted for no reason other than the fact that they're black. It's called affirmative action, also known as legalized racist favoritism.
I said, God damn.
In summary, Rhodey, Nick Fury, and the writers on this show can take their racist bullshit and
Fuck off!
Regardless, we now move over to a butcher shop in Moscow. The annoying British woman from MI6 arrives to find a bunch of Russian guys trying to interrogate the American guy who had been at the attack in Moscow. She hands a phone over to the leader, who apparently is instructed to leave and let this annoying woman take over. As the guy is leaving, he says that they tried everything and they can't get him to talk. The entire point of this is to make the men look incompetent, and this stunning and brave woman is going to be able to succeed almost instantly where the dumb men have failed.
She was such a strong female woman.
Once again, this sort of writing is about as subtle as a jackhammer. And surprise, surprise, she does exactly that within seconds. She takes out a pair of shears and cuts off the American guy's finger, who of course is revealed to be a Skrull. The funny thing is that he threatened to break the chains and then kill her, which is something that he absolutely could have done because the Skrulls are strong enough to do that, and yet he just sits there and allows her to cut off his finger, and then after it happens, he continues to sit in the chair like a fucking moron.
Like, what? Excuse me?
I get it that the Skrull is trying to maintain his cover, but as soon as she cuts off his finger, it's going to be revealed that he's not human, and therefore there's no reason for him to allow it to happen. And furthermore, once it does happen, and it is revealed that he's a Skrull, why would he just continue to sit there? His cover's been blown. At that point, he should be doing everything he can to try to fix the situation, and yet he just sits there like an idiot.
Not a great plan.
Dani uses her own computer to do some snooping on the network at the Skrull base. Now, it makes sense for her to have a logon and a password, even to the network, but why would she have access to all of the ultra super secret lab files that Gravik doesn't want anyone to know about? There is no explanation on why she would have access to this. She just does, and apparently it's very convenient for the story. Dani finds some information on Project Harvest, which shows that Gravik and the Skrulls have been collecting DNA from various creatures throughout the universe. Again, Dani is the number 2 leader here. I don't know why she wouldn't know all of this. But she is interrupted by Gravik, who says that they managed to find Brogan, and that's the Skrull that's currently being interrogated by the annoying lady. And that Gravik says that they need to go and rescue this guy. Back at the butcher shop, the annoying lady is still trying to interrogate him. She says that she's going to inject him with some kind of a serum that will make his blood boil, or something to that effect, and this is supposed to make him talk. Once more, I have to point out that this guy is a Skrull. He has super strength. We've already seen that the Skrulls are capable of breaking metal chains in this series. Why isn't he trying to free himself? We don't know, but he just continues to sit there, and like an idiot, he allows the annoying lady to inject him with the serum stuff. The serum starts to cause incredible pain, and the guy begins revealing some information about what Gravik and the Skrulls are planning. Meanwhile, Gravik and the others have just arrived outside, which seems kind of strange because the abandoned nuclear base that they stay at is several hours south of Moscow, and yet they were able to drive here and make it in only a matter of minutes. I guess Dani borrowed her jetpack from the Game of Thrones series, and they must have just used that.
I understood that reference.
Gravik and his men manage to take out all of the Russians in the building. However, the annoying woman is able to escape through a super secret tunnel that was built into the floor of the freezer room. But it gets even more lucky for her because even though she's old and out of shape and had to very slowly climb down the ladder and then crawl through a tunnel, neither Gravik nor any of his men ever think to, you know, go after her at all. They don't even mention it, really. One of them just kind of like looks down there and then just shrugs and decides, there's no point. We won't even bother. And the Brogan guy who had been held prisoner, he doesn't say, hey, you should probably go after that lady because she knows that I'm a Skrull because they cut off my finger and now it's pretty obvious that everybody's going to know that I'm a Skrull and this and that and yada yada. You should probably go after her. And then nobody does that because reasons, I guess.
What a story.
Instead, Gravik decides that they should all just pile into the car and drive back to the base. At some point, they stop and Gravik has the Brogan guy killed because he was weak or something, even though this isn't really explained. I mean, yeah, he was captured, but that was kind of the point. That was the whole plan that they set up. He was pretending to be an American, and he was trying to set up hostilities between Russia and America. That was the whole plan. So it's not like he had been captured because he was dumb or weak or a coward or not. That was literally the plan that they were doing. So it doesn't really make any sense why he would just have this guy killed. And also, they just kind of like drop the body off of the side of the road where it's almost certainly going to be discovered, and when a Skrull dies, they revert back to their normal form, so someone's gonna drive by here and they're gonna see a green alien on the side of the road, and it's probably gonna be a pretty good indicator that the Skrulls are in the area. It just doesn't make any sense.
That's what turns me on about you. Your attention to detail.
Next up, we get to see Nick Fury arriving at a house with a strange woman that we've never seen before. As the scene continues, he takes a wedding ring out of a bowl and puts it onto his finger, walks over to the strange woman, and kisses her. This is apparently his wife that he's been able to keep a secret from the rest of the world. She also happens to be a Skrull. We'll see more on this later. So quick recap, in this episode, we got to sit down and watch boring meetings again and again and again. We were also lectured about some race-baiting woke nonsense 4 or 5 times. Meanwhile, the total amount of entertainment value that had been contained within this episode is precisely 0. Unfortunately, that's not going to get any better, but thankfully, that's the end of episode 2.
Taking shots at the enemy. I'm gonna make it to the top, leave a legacy. If I got something to say, you better let me speak. Turn it up a new degree, bitch, you ain't seen anything.